Hello everyone, this is Mark Lucchesi, also known as Mark at the Mic, and my guest today is Rusty Knudsen, a 1974 graduate of Burlingame High School. Rusty now lives in San Ramon with his wife and high school sweetheart, formerly Diane Ragazzino, and their 3 children, 2 sons, Tyler and Brooks, and their daughter, Shannon. Rusty, thanks for being a guest today on Burlingame. It's a small town podcast sponsored by the Burlingame Historical Society.
It's great to be here, Mark.
I was hoping you were going to say that, Rusty. Okay, it's making me a little nervous. So anyway, before we start our interview, Rusty, I'm going to just put a quick disclaimer out to our listeners. I want them to understand that this is not going to be the normal question and answer type of a podcast. Rusty and I are going to take a visual memory of 3 spots that were meant to a lot to us as youngsters growing up. Burlingame Avenue, the rec center, which is now the community center, beautiful building, and of course our little section of Lionhogue called Victoria Park, or as we called it, the Little Park. So anyway, we're going to start over by the Royal Donut Shop. Rusty, as a senior coming out of Burlingame High in 1974, you're standing in front of the Royal Donut Shop. What do you remember? What was it when you were a child?
Yeah, when I was growing up, it was Flings. Earlier it was Hasty Tasty, right? But it just kind of changed over to Flings, but it was the same menu.
Same menu. Yep.
Same menu.
The home of the 22-cent hamburger, and if you wanted a deluxe, I think it was 33 cents.
Probably,
like that.
I wouldn't even know.
So if we slide over in front of the train station, we're looking directly across the street, but maybe to the left-hand corner of Burlingame Avenue. I'm visualizing Sam's and maybe Clyde's barbershop. Was it the same for you?
Yes, it was. Clyde's barbershop was the where we got our haircuts. Right? Attending Washington School.
Right.
That was the place to go. So everybody got the same haircut. But in my brother, Steve, who was 1 year behind me, his senior year, he asked Clyde, he took a picture of this Sports Illustrated cover magazine that had Ernie Holmes from the Pittsburgh Steelers on for winning the Super Bowl that year, and he showed him his Arrowhead haircut, and he told Clyde, "This is what I want." So Clyde gave him the first Arrowhead haircut that Steve wore for football season that year.
That had to be one of the first mohawks of Burlingame High School,
it was.
Right? Yeah. And what about Sam's Sandwiches? Was that around when you were a senior?
Actually, Sam's just opened. I think it was maybe my junior year. And fortunately, we were open campus, so we could go out at lunch.
You still were an open campus, because I know they eventually closed it
so
down.
That's what helped Sam's tremendously. In fact, thinking about, and I grew up eating Sam's, and every time I go on a business trip, because I live in San Ramon now, I would always go to Sam's to get a sandwich on the way out or on the way back, depending on the time of my flight.
Yeah, and that was owned by one of our boys from the hood, Reno Betty, and his girlfriend or wife eventually, June. And now, just for our listeners, I want them to, we're looking at the left-hand side of that corner. It's now become Limon Restaurant. It's become quite a development of a building. So if we're walking up Burlingame Avenue on the left-hand side of the street, we're heading towards El Camino. Do you remember a sporting goods store called Ricky's?
Yeah, I do. In fact, I think that's where we got all our equipment for the Little League during the 64, 5, and 6 seasons.
Right. And then Ricky's eventually went to more bicycles. You got into the Schwinn bicycle business, and I think eventually it became Burlingame Cyclery, I believe.
Yeah, and my first bike that I was able to purchase was at the Schwinn bike shop.
Right.
It was a Schwinn Latour, which I just coveted my whole childhood, and I was able to buy it my year after I graduated.
So for anybody that's new to Burlingame or wants to know what's there now, it's now become 5 Little Monkeys, a toy store. Also, what about meeting breakfast at Nelson's? I remember Nelson's being large and cheap breakfast. Did you ever eat at Nelson's?
Yeah, in fact, we used to do that after church. We went to St. Catherine's, and then after church we go over to Nelson's. My brother Tim, who's 6 years younger than I am, and at the time, if you can envision this 5-year-old kid walking into Nelson's, the Asian guy that would place the settings and the coffee cups on the table, he would see my brother Tim, and he would immediately say, "The Pancake King is here, the Pancake King." And he would hold his hand up with his little finger and thumb extended and say, "He eats 6 pancakes."
So if we're walking somewhere up Burlingame Ave, and I just remember certain places, and I'm not, they just come back to me, but there was Walmer's record shop. Do you remember that at all?
I do, and I think they also rented music instruments, because I got my first violin there.
Really?
when I took violin at
Rusty
Washington
Knudsen
School.
playing violin. That's
I
great.
know. I transferred to the electric guitar.
The one thing I remember about that is you could play before you bought a 45, you could listen to it in a little listening room, and I always thought that was pretty cool. So it's now, just so everybody knows, it's now Topper's Jewelry. However, Topper's is moving across the street, and so I think it's going to be vacated, and who knows what it's going to turn up to be. So continuing up the left-hand side was Levy Brothers. That was a 2-level department store. I think they had one in San Mateo as well. It's now been converted to a mall. It's called the Landmark, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But do you remember Levy Brothers much?
Yeah, that's where we did all our shopping.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't have a Mervyn's.
Joe and the Juice is one of the best-known shops at that particular site. Okay, so we continue up. We're going to cross Primrose Road, and on the corner of Primrose was Toll's Restaurant. It was a Burlingame favorite. Do you remember that at all? Toll's?
You know, I don't. I don't remember Toll's. I
well,
think.
you know why? Because you wouldn't go there. It kind of was more for the, at that time, when we were young like that, it was more for the, we'll call it senior age, okay?
Okay.
That's why you didn't go there. It's now the Asian Box on the corner. Anyway, continuing up the left-hand side was the Great Fox Theater, okay? And I can remember Charlie Cook taking Dee and myself and other friends to the movies, and Charlie was a member of the fire department. He would buzz us in with his badge, which means we could get in free, right? Do you remember the same? Do you remember the Fox?
I do. In fact, you know, as a kid, my mom took us all the time to the Fox to see the latest Disney movie.
Right. The Disney
and I don't
movies.
know if it was, one of the ones with Kurt Russell maybe in it. And we watched the whole movie, and they were going to show it again. And we said, hey, can we see it again? And she said, yeah, let's just stay and see it again. So we just stayed in our seat and watched it again.
Do you remember Kermit the Usher or Kermit the
I do
Cop?
remember Kermit the Cop. Yeah, that's right.
Right. He was an usher there.
He was.
Yeah. And
So here's an interesting thing here. That was my first date with my now wife, Diane, that you mentioned earlier. We went to see a movie there with Robert Redford and Barbara Streisand, The Way We Were.
Gosh,
And
great.
that was a good movie for us. But about 6 months later, they were tearing it down.
Yeah.
And I have a picture in our scrapbook of me sitting on the bulldozer in the back, looking like I'm going to tear the theater down. Half of it was gone, but it was a weekend, so the workers were gone. But I got a picture of me on the bulldozer.
Yeah. To our listeners, the Fox Theater is now the Fox Mall, and it houses several kinds of different shops over there. So, and as we head towards the end of Burlingame Avenue, we're now on the corner of Burlingame Avenue and El Camino. There was a Chevron station there. And if you cross the street, okay, there was a Chevron station, which is now Walgreens, right, on the corner. But if you cross the street, there was a Shell station. So these guys battled back and forth, I guess. And now that's a public parking lot. And the one thing about that public parking lot, it butts up right against my old employer, Molly Stone's.
Yeah.
Okay. So you remember all that as well?
I do, because as a kid, you know, when we were done with rec league at the park during the summer, we'd ride around Burlingame Avenue, of course. And there was one of the guys that was a coach, kind of an assistant coach at rec. He was a gas station attendant at Chevron.
At Chevron?
And so we'd be hanging out talking to him, and a car would come in to get gas, and he'd say, hey, go ahead and give him gas.
Take care of him?
So, yeah, and we were like 11 or 12 years old, so I'd run over to the guy and say, hey, how much you want? And they'd say, give me $5.
Yeah, that had to be the day of full service. That was the day of full service.
That was full service, that's right. But I couldn't find where you put the gas because I didn't know it was behind the back bumper's license plate. So I'm literally walking around the car with the thing in my hand, and they were all laughing, saying, it's behind the license. And I kept looking, going, where is it?
Oh, gosh.
It's funny.
Okay, so going down Burlingame Avenue, now we're facing the train station, and it's really on the left-hand side as we're facing the train station. Robert W. Gates, that was a real high-end women and men's clothing store. Do you recollect that at all?
I do. I just know that it was, like you said, a very high-end store. My family was more of a blue-collar family, so we weren't going to be seen in that store too often.
No, I get it. I do remember, though, going in there occasionally just for whatever reason, and I remember they had a fireplace in there, man, a fire. Now it's still the same. It's a high-end clothing store. It's owned by Gloria and Sam Maloof, and they do a heck of a job there. So Morning Glory. Do you remember Morning Glory?
Well, yeah, a couple of the girls went to Burlingame High School.
Correct.
So
That's
I'm
right.
friends with them.
That's right. Paulette
Yeah,
Monroe
Paulette,
and her
that's right.
sister Maureen. That's
Yeah.
right. And I think they graduated 1972, and I think maybe Maureen was 1971. In fact, they're celebrating 50 years in business this July.
That's great.
For anybody that's wondering what it was before, it was an interior design shop owned by Samantha Cole. But anyway, as we head down Burlingame Avenue, still continuing our walk to the train station, how about we come to the corner of Primrose and Primrose and Burlingame Ave, was the Burlingame Smoke Shop.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where I first got acquainted with the girly magazines. When the guy wasn't looking, you pop open a Penthouse or whatever they had. And so, do you remember the smoke shop?
I do. I remember them putting out the big Indian guy
Yes,
out in front,
right.
all carved out of wood, which
Yep.
is really cool.
Yep.
But the smoke shop, the way it looks today, I think when we saw it, the brick were all covered, because I remember when they uncovered it,
Yeah.
and that was like a shock.
It was, wasn't
to
it?
see that there was actually another
Yeah.
facade already there that looked better than what they had
It's
put out
it's
there.
a great look. Yeah.
It is a great look, and I'm glad that they kept it.
So across the street from the smoke shop, looking directly across the street, was Bennett's Pharmacy. Do you remember Bennett's Pharmacy at all?
I don't.
Okay. Do you know that we had 3 pharmacies on the avenue?
I know we had a lot of
Yeah, we
farms.
had, I think, Burlingame Avenue Pharmacy it was called, and then we had Bennett's, and then farther down the street we had Miller Drugs.
Miller Drugs, that's right.
Yeah. So continuing down, on our walk, there was Smith and Heller Shoes, and next door was Simpson's Men's Shop. Do you remember them?
I remember the name, yep.
Do you remember going to them at all?
I didn't go there for
Probably went
any
to
of
Levy
this stuff.
Brothers.
Yeah, that's right. We were a Levy Brothers family. We could have
Anyway.
probably been in their brochures.
Yeah, they were great places to buy shoes and clothing. So, and I believe what's going in there now is Topper's Jewelry. I took a little walk of the avenue this morning to kind of go over everything, and it's hard to kind of remember because some of the buildings have been reconfigured and things like that. But and then of course there was F&W's Woolworths. You remember with the old time fountain?
That was my favorite shop, right? We'd go there to get a milkshake and sit up at the bar, the counter.
And it seems like they had kind of cool junky stuff, right?
It was fun. They had that little merry-go-round thing when you were a
Yes.
little kid that you would go on.
Yep.
And I remember getting my first set of Converse at the time high tops, which were kind of like the new PF Flyers. Right?
Yeah.
And my
Converse high
buddy
tops.
Keith had to have got a pair, and I had to have a pair. So we went down to get them, and of course they didn't have my size. But I talked my mom into get me the size up that I would be eventually growing into them. Of course, it took me 6 more years to grow into them. But I had the high top Converse, which is really cool.
And again, Woolworths is now, I think it's housed by Madwell, and I'm not sure what Madwell is. And anyway, Madwell is there, and Amazon, which is vacated. They had a little pop-up shop, but they've taken off from there. Charles Stationery. Do you remember Charles Stationery?
Yeah.
Okay. The one thing about Charles Stationery, it was owned by Chuck Gopher, and Chuck was my first Babe Ruth League coach.
Oh,
coached
nice.
Cubs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eric Houts, I was on the team. Bill Borelli.
Oh, wow.
Mike Shembry. Yeah. So we had some pretty good ball players on there. And I think Charles Stationery is now Copenhagen Bakery. Pretty sure that's where it was, right? And, kind of scooted in there. So, you remember Miller Drugs?
I
It was
do
on the
remember
corner,
Miller Drugs.
which is now the Luggage Center. Okay?
Yep.
So, any other thoughts about Burlingame Avenue come to you right now?
Well, I remember, one of my fun memories is they had a payphone out on the middle of Burlingame Avenue facing the bank. So it was across the street. I think there was a liquor store there.
Okay.
And I was on the phone talking to somebody, and up the street comes this red Ferrari, and he slows down where the phone is, and I'm on the phone. It's Joe Montana pulling over
gosh.
to get out to go into the bank.
Yep.
And he went in the bank, and I was on the phone saying, "Oh my God, Joe Montana just
Yeah.
drove by me, and he's going into the bank next door."
Boy.
That was kind of a cool thing. And Nathan's, the restaurant.
Yeah, Nathan's was a great place.
I
Thank you for
ate there
bringing
with
that
Bill
up.
Walsh.
Yeah. With who?
Bill Walsh from the 49ers.
Oh my gosh, he just happened to be there.
He happened to be there
Yeah.
at Nathan's.
Nathan's was well known, and it did very well.
Yeah, it was. I love that place.
Yeah, and Nathan's a great guy. Okay, so before we leave Burlingame Avenue, I have to mention Jim Super. That was my parents' store. It was on the corner of Primrose and Howard.
Oh.
Okay, now Citibank. Apparently you didn't know that, Rusty.
I didn't know that.
I could tell by the, okay. And next to it was Primrose Lanes. That was the bowling alley and the pool tables, pinball machines. You remember that?
I do, because the Jacobsons owned it for a while.
I thought they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're talking about Bill Jacobson, Buddy Jacobson,
Bob
Jacobson.
Brad Jacobson.
Yes, right.
And we always call him Mr. Jacobson, the gentle
yes,
giant.
so did I.
Yeah, his hand would cover your whole head.
Huge. And they eventually evolved into the big piano moving.
Jacobson's Transfer.
Yes, and they would do pianos, and I know they moved a couple of ours a couple of times. So, and then if I am going to go around the block now and go down Primrose, because there was Toy Town. That was a big. Do you remember Toy Town?
Yeah, we used to go. That's where we'd always go hang out.
There was
pick
no
out our
toy
presents.
stores around. There was no Toys R Us. I'm not sure if Talbot's was up and running at the time. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was too far to go to San Mateo.
It seemed like a long ways to go, right?
Yeah.
So you would just go to Toy Town, which became Anthropology, but now it's a vacant building. Anthropology, I think, came upon tough times during the pandemic, so they moved on. And down the street from Arthur's Toy Town is the Studio Shop, which I think is Burlingame's oldest retail store, over 100 years in business.
Oh, wow.
I know. So anyway, to our listeners, that sort of concludes a memory tour of Burlingame Avenue. And Rusty and I are going to take a little walk over to the brand new community center, but we knew it back in the day as the Rec Center. And that community center just had its grand opening on June 15th. It's state of the art, that's for sure. Rusty, go ahead and share some memories of the Rec Center.
Well, that's where I spent my whole childhood. Every year our vacation was at the Rec Center. We never went on any vacations, right? My dad was a welder, and he just worked the whole time. And so, but we enjoyed it. My mom would load up the wagon. We lived down Burlingame Avenue, and we'd just walk. She'd have all the sandwiches, all the lemonade, whatever we were drinking on the wagon. We'd take off for the Rec Center, and we would stay there all day. So the boys would be involved with the baseball program. The girls would be in the rec where they were doing plays, watching movies, doing the different things that they do there.
The girls weren't playing sports at that time.
That's right. They were taking care of the little kids that got dropped off.
Yeah.
I remember as a child, probably 8 years old, I was walking over the monkey bars that were kind of a half moon. Mm-hmm. I was eating a bag of chips, and I was showing off, and I was going over the top without using hands, just walking and keeping my balance. Of course, I slipped. I put my hands out to break my fall, and I miss, and I take the full brunt right on the right on the head and split my eyebrow open. And your buddy here, I see Charlie Gear, freaked out. And my mom was getting her hair done, so no cell phones back in the day.
None.
So they had to call the police. The police came, and they picked me up and put me in a squad car to take me to Peninsula Hospital to get stitched. And I remember getting in the back seat, taking the bandage away and looking and saying, "Oh, that doesn't look good."
Yeah.
13 stitches.
13 stitches from the monkey bars to the to the concrete. Now they've laid down all that padding and stuff.
Yeah, now you got all that stuff.
So you remember Charlie Gear? That's great. Charlie was a longtime rec leader there, along with Rich Foley, I went to St. Catherine's with, and he went to Burlingame. Do you remember Ray? Ray
Wagner, I just saw him at the opening for the community center.
You came over for that?
Yeah, he was over, and we got to reminisce about the old days.
Yeah.
So it was really good to see him.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. I mean, I haven't really toured it, but Kathy and I were on vacation when they opened it, so I want somebody to just take me by the hand and walk me through.
It's very amazing. Well set up. They did a great job with the architecture, obviously.
Yep.
But the way they set it up with the afternoon sun, they have the pitch of the roof in such a way that the roof extends beyond the windows, so it casts a shadow over, so you don't get direct sunlight until late, like 4 or 5 in the afternoon in the summer.
Yep.
And by that time, the programs are pretty much done at that point.
They're pretty much done.
So it's just beautiful. And I want to make another quick thing.
Go ahead.
That's where my wife asked me to dance for the first time at the Burlingame High Valentine's dance on February 15th, 1974. Promptly told her, "Thank you, but no thanks, I don't dance."
Right.
But she didn't take no for an answer, thank God, and dragged me out there. And we've been together ever since. So.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So that was the Valentine's Day dance of 1974?
1974.
Okay, were rec dances still going on at that time?
Oh, yeah. That's why we were there, for the rec dance.
Do you know when the rec dances stopped by any chance?
I don't know when they stopped doing them.
Yeah.
But I do know
They
that
were great. They were Friday nights.
it was always Friday night.
And can you remember some of the bands?
Yeah, we were fortunate because I was there from 70 through 74. So we had Tower Power play there. We had Santana play there. And this is, they were on the brink of becoming superstars,
Right.
but they were playing at the rec dance. At the time, we didn't really
Didn't know it. Didn't
know
think
it.
anything about it.
Yeah. But looking back and
But as you
saying
look
that's the
back now, you
caliber.
go, oh my God, right?
I brought that up to Ray Wagner, and he said that he had extra money to put out towards these bands that were trying to make it big.
Yeah.
And the most he paid was $300
Amazing.
for these guys.
Yeah.
And still, the budget people would say $300 for
Yeah.
a band.
So I wonder why they came to an end. I know that there would be some fights every now and then behind the rec, or maybe guys would come. I guess maybe disorderly or something caused the neighbors kind of got pissed off or something.
I would think that the neighbors, because of the people drinking maybe
Yeah.
later, we didn't have that problem when I was younger.
I don't remember.
You
I
probably
remember
didn't have
some
it.
skirmishes, but they were just rivalry high school type stuff. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So anyway.
It was fun, though.
Hey, do you remember the Little League field?
I do.
Do you remember where it was?
Yeah, it was actually called GE Field. It was
Yeah.
owned by General Electric.
Yeah.
It was out on what's now called Rollins Road. I don't know what they call it, Amplet or Bayshore
Adrian.
Boulevard, or
Adrian.
is that what they called it back then?
Yes.
Is it still called that now?
I think it's Adrian Road. I think
Oh,
it was
it
on
is?
Adrian
Okay.
Road. Yeah. You know what happened? I reached out, and I want to thank these guys. There's this Facebook page called "If You Remember the '60s and '70s."
Oh,
And I said, hey, does anybody remember the Little League field? Where was it? That kind of thing. And,
Yeah.
the reason why I remember it well, too, is obviously I played there, but my dad had a big Jim Super thing out on, because all the sponsors.
yeah. On the
would be
fence.
Yeah. So you remember it, yeah.
Yeah, I used to announce games when I got a little older. I announced other guys' games, and
Yeah.
it was just fun. We loved going there. My dad coached my younger brother, Tim, and Nathaniel Crosby was on that team.
Oh, no kidding.
So Bing Crosby would come,
Yeah.
and he would stand out in the left field foul line with his tweed hat and his pipe, and he'd be smoking out there away from everybody else, and no one would bother him.
Yeah.
They would just say, leave him alone.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is he would drive himself to the park in a Pinto station wagon with the wood fake sides. And I thought, wow, there's somebody that you wouldn't recognize as Bing Crosby.
Being very humble, being very conservative. there.
Yeah,
That's fun.
very cool.
Yeah. Okay, so we had great times at the rec, you and I both, and we're going to walk down Burlingame Avenue now, and we're going to end up at Victoria Park, also known as the Little Park, and in our little slice of life down there in Lion Hogue. And so I'm going to just tell our listeners where to describe Lion Hogue. It's bordered by Peninsula Avenue, Burlingame Avenue. It goes up as far as Anita, which I think is right around Washington Elementary School. And behind us is Rollins Road. So it's like a little square, and that was Lion Hogue. And I pretty much grew up at, the Victoria Park, which is on the corner of Victoria and Howard. And that's where we would play sports year round. Whatever sport was in season at that time, that's what we played. Right?
Yeah, that's
Baseball,
right.
football, basketball. And there was just lots of great guys and lots of great memories there. I know you lived close by there. Did you guys?
I was right around the corner. So
Yeah.
I was on Burlingame and Victoria.
Yeah.
So we were one house in from the corner.
Okay. Did you spend more time there, or did you spend more time at the rec, or did you split it up?
Well, we were always at the park during the summer because we were part of the rec league and that.
Got it.
And then we'd have these pickup games with Pete Jensen and
Yeah.
Craig Beller and the coaches. And we'd do these little, over the line games,
Yep.
which is kind of fun and kind of dive for balls and learn that out in the outfield. So that was taking us out to 5 o'clock. But then after a while, with the son being out there and having more access to some other kids, we continue playing out there. And my dad would go out, have a couple of beers with Mr. Houts on his way home from work, and he would drive by and drive in the parking lot of the left field fence at Washington,
Yep.
beep the horn on a certain pattern that we knew, that was basically saying, get your butts home for dinner.
Yeah.
And so we get on our bikes and ride home. But once we had dinner, we would head out to Victoria Park.
As long as it was daylight saving time, you could go right on back
Yeah.
out. Yeah.
And that's where we were always playing
and
basketball,
your parents
football.
always knew where to find you.
Yeah, it was very easy.
You know, they always knew where you were. And I thought it was an amazing time. We would play there all day long from dawn till dusk. And we would take maybe a couple of breaks during the day and go up to Fred's Market.
Yeah.
And sit there and have a Coke and choose some, you know, they had a big candy selection, have candy bars.
And Fred's was on Howard and Channing, right?
Correct. Yes.
Like another block and a half, 2 blocks away. I mean, it was very convenient.
And then around the block, we would sometimes go over to, I think it's on Idaho, which was housed, it's now, well, it was Nini's for the longest time. But prior to that, it was Mike Shembry's uncle and aunt's little grocery store. And we would go there once in a while. And just mentioning Nini's, that was a real landmark.
That was our go-to place.
Yep.
That was like if there were a Cheers of a breakfast spot.
Yep.
Where everybody knew your name, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You went there, they knew you if you were a resident, right?
Yeah.
You get the same thing. I always got the same thing. It was never
Yeah, they
changed.
would know, he would say the usual, the usual,
The
right?
usual.
Yeah.
But we would sit there with Jeffrey Leonard from the Giants. Different people would come in there. You'd always see some celebrity there.
Yeah.
Mr. Jacobson was always at the bar getting his usual. So you would always be able to see somebody you knew at Nini's.
Yeah. So I grew up with, I'm going to name some guys here today because this show is dedicated to these guys who are making such an impact on our lives. And you can add some names in there, okay? Because, you know, we have a little age difference, but my brother Paul, Mike and Joey Shembry, and I hope some of our listeners remember some of these names, John and Tony Gula, Eric and Greg Houts, the late Greg Houts. I think Burlingame just put him in the Hall of Fame.
That's right, we did that a couple years
for his
ago.
Football. Bill Poindexter lived on the corner. Dennis Hartle was a very good basketball player at Burlingame High in the mid-'60s. There were the Carbonis, Mike and Pete, Lenny Lebrano, Bill, here we go again, Bill,
Bob,
Buddy,
Bud, and Brad.
Jacobson's, right. What a great family that was. There was Dick Walker, Gary Zarelli, Bill Borelli. You remember Bill Borelli at all?
I do.
Yeah, Bill was a great ball player, played at Santa Clara. I think he had a cup of coffee with the majors, but not much more than that. How about the Hanchey brothers? I remember Perry.
Yeah, there was Mike Hanchey.
Yes.
Yeah, funny thing, my mom was just sharing a story with me. I told her we were going to chat.
Yeah.
And she said, I said, yeah, we're going to talk about some of the old guys. And she brought the Hanchey. She said, my dad had asked if he could help with our Green Sox team. And he's looking for a pitcher. And so he tried out all the kids, and he came back and said, hey, I found a pitcher for you. And my dad said, oh, great. Who is he? He goes, well, I don't know if you're going to like it, but your son, Rusty, he's the one that can throw it over the plate consistently. He's like, really? And yeah, so that was courtesy of Mike Hanchey.
Yeah, courtesy of Mike Hanchey. Wow. And then there was Larry Putman. That's no relation to the Putman Buick now, but Larry's dad was the postmaster general here in Burlingame for the longest time. Do you remember the Solashinkles, Alex and
I
Val?
do. I knew Alex. Yep.
Yeah. And then, of course, there was the Santos brothers, Don and Dan.
Yeah, Don played on our Green Sox team.
Right?
Yep.
Rich Coakley, he's a little older than you.
I didn't know Rich.
Yeah. Well, the great thing about Rich Coakley, his dad was my very first Little League coach of the Cardinals when we were playing Little League.
Nice.
Do you remember the Dobsons at all?
I knew Neil. He was a little ahead of me in Burlingame as well.
Right, he had an older brother, Graham. So anyway, I kind of just, I hope we're not boring our listeners with these names, but these were all names that were very influential.
Well, not only influential, but you look at that whole area and you gloss over a lot of names, but when you look at the athletes that came out of that area, the Kolesnikows,
yes,
they were right down the street on Bayswater. Scanoni's I coached Steve Scanoni, and he was a phenomenal football player at Burlingame High. The Aliotos, Mark Alioto Dean, and the whole family was. Mark was a big athlete. Dean is into making movies in L.A. Wow. He does TVs, shows, and he does all writing and all that. He's got a couple of movies right now that you can see on Netflix. So, yeah, but there's a lot of good athletes out there.
Yeah. So I'm just going to say, back then girls didn't play sports, and so we didn't really get involved with them playing sports, but I know we liked girls, okay? In fact, there was a few girls in my neighborhood that we certainly didn't mind seeing them coming around. It was Dee Dee Cook, right? Charlie's daughter, and Bobby
right.
and Jackie Carley, Francine Nelson, all cute girls. But we didn't really have a lot of time, you know what I mean? They weren't playing sports, and we wanted to show off a little bit in front of them when they showed up. Do you remember any girls in the neighborhood?
Yeah, the Barnes family, that was a huge family down on Bayswater as well. There's a lot of girls in that family, Cindy and Teresa and Debbie.
Okay.
They're all cute.
Yeah.
Ellen Waters lived around the corner.
Gee, see, I don't remember any of these ladies.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
why I'm glad you're mentioning them.
Yeah, Beth Keating was another girl that ended up being Miss Burlingame. She lived right down the street.
Really?
She was in the class of 74. I walked all these girls' homes with their books. That's what I did.
So, Rusty, I try to keep these things to around 30 to 40 minutes,
Sure.
and we're getting at about that time now, and I know you got to drive back to San Ramon. But before we wrap this up, I just want to let everybody know that, you're still very involved with Burlingame and Burlingame High School, even though you live over in San Ramon. You're president of the Burlingame High Alumni Association, and that we're going to come back maybe later this year, early next year, and we're going to devote some time to just talking about the alumni and what you hope to do for the big celebration of 100 years coming up. So.
Yeah, we have a lot of things that are on the final planning stages, right? So we don't want to preempt anything yet on that, but it is going to be an event worthy of 100 years. Let me put it that way. It's going to cover a couple of days.
Yeah.
There's going to be plenty of activity, but we're trying to bring the nostalgic back we're telling everybody, come home.
Yeah.
Come home to Burlingame where
great.
you really brought up your childhood and your adolescence, right, at the high school. And I think it's going to be fun for everybody.
And I look forward to it. I didn't go there, but my brother did, my 3 children did.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of allegiance to Burlingame High, so we look forward to it.
That's great.
Rusty Knudsen, thank you very much for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciated it.
I'd like to thank Rusty Knudsen for being a guest today on Burlingame. It's a small town. Also, thanks to Kathy and Shelby for editing and producing. Our musical director, Bray. You can hear more of Bray at bray.com. And as always, thanks to the Burlingame Library for allowing me to use a conference room for our recording. The Burlingame Historical Society copyrights this podcast, and no part of this program can be rebroadcast or copied without permission. So until next time, everyone, see you around Burlingame. It's a small town.